everyone, and welcome back to the CayVin Universe podcast. Caylin has the week off this week because she's been picking up my slack. So I got a very good one for you. We got JV Hilliard today. He's the author of the epic fantasy book series Warminster, which is a part of a four-part saga. JV, how's it going today, man?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we rescheduled on you a few times, so sorry about that. But yeah, we're trying to get back on the ball with things. But yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you know, it's like something I always ask people, or authors, when they come on the show, is like, what like started the writing process for you? Like, is it something you always wanted to do, or is it something that you picked up along the way? Some inspiration? Like, I guess we like to just go back to, the start of it all. Where did it all start?
Yeah, so I became a fan of fantasy adventure when I was at a very young age, and I wanted to become an author for two reasons. First, my uncle was a Marine, and he was paralyzed in combat, and my mother, when he came home, was his nurse. And there's very few things that he was able to do, and we lived at his house, and so it was sort of like he was like a second father to me in many senses. And as a result, he two of the things he could do were write and play Dungeons and Dragons, right? So as a quadriplegic, they fastened the implement that he could use to type on his keyboard. And, back in the day, he would submit short stories, mostly horror or suspense to like Pulp Fiction magazines and stuff like that, and would get published that way. And so growing up by his bedside, I always wanted to emulate him, right? He wanted to be him, and he was a writer. I wanted to be a writer. And then I found out that I was pretty good at it. And when I was in elementary school, fourth grade, I was entered into an eighth grade competition and won it.
Ooh.
And just knew at that point, eventually, I was going to do some form of communication or some form of writing. And I fell in love with the fantasy adventure stuff because The Hobbit and my Dungeons and Dragons play. My uncle used that as a form of escapism from his own form. He didn't have to be a paralyzed veteran. Instead, he was, the fighter or the wizard or the Hobbit, whatever it was that he wanted to be in the game. And so those two things came together, and at first I thought I was going to be a writer right in college, but as things turned out, I ended up becoming a defense lobbyist. I did a lot of stuff, in DC for a while. And when COVID happened, everything shut down for about a year and a half. And I used that downtime to write my first novel, which then came, to four novels and now on to three more this coming year. So, I came back, 20 years later, to a dream that I had when I was, 17.
Right, right. And it's kind of bittersweet or a double-edged sword. That's kind of the thing that the pandemic did is it was a crazy time, but a lot of people got to do kind of the things that they've always wanted to do, or at least start it. I know, some things don't last, but that's good that you made this a four-part series already. And it starts with the first book is The Last Keeper. So can you kind of describe that book and like the characters in it? And I know it's like you said, it's like Dungeons and Dragons or Game of Thrones, or like even I'm into like Assassin's Creed or like things like that. I want to get into Dungeons and Dragons too, but yeah, first let's talk some about your book.
Yeah, sure. So The Last Keeper is a hero's journey, right? If you love Star Wars or the Harry Potter books or Homer, any of the stuff there, it's a lot like that, where you get a young, in this case, young Damus Alaric, who is he's a prophet and he's able to see things that are yet to come to pass. And he goes away to this cathedral where they teach him how to use those powers and eventually would send him and others like him forth to advise the kings and queens and the emperors around the world. But Damus is the only, hence the last keeper that's able to see the return of a fallen keeper, one that used his power of prophecy for personal gain, and their gods punished him, and not only away his ability to see this future, but also stole his physical sight. And so he became blind as a result. But he was coming back to take revenge on his sect, and Damus is the one that's there to see him. So it's, can Damus rally the troops and go on this harrowing adventure to stop this big bad evil guy from coming back? And so it's a lot like what I would describe as the false prophet meeting the chosen one. And if you like that kind of challenge, and in this case, a hero's journey, you'll like Damus and the fight he has with Great Taurus the Man.
Wow. And is there like a certain, well, I know, it's like a fantasy world, but, and I don't know if I missed that when you said it, like, is there a certain, like, I guess, time period or like in this alternate universe that you have it set in?
Yeah, so it's basically the realm of Warminster. So it's very much like Middle Earth for The Hobbit, or Westeros for
Right.
for Game of Thrones. I have my own world and I built it up. So those that venture into the realm get a chance to see its own magic system, its own currency, its own pantheon of gods. And when you write epic fantasy, a lot of that is expected of you, because fans of the genre like to drive deep. They want to know that there's a history. They want to know that there's a future. They want
Right.
to
I was
know
just
that
gonna
there's
ask that, like, how
all
deep
these other
lore?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really what it is, right? So like we've got all that in there. So I've if you get book one, you'll see a map that's made. Book two is a close up of the map, and you also see sort of like the flow chart for the Keepers of the Forbidden. You also get a family tree of
See,
the world,
that's
and things
always
like that. I
cool.
think
That's always
yeah,
cool.
that kind of stuff I think people really, really enjoy, and then they can go and do a deep dive. And I get questions like that all the time about, what happened in the past, what happened in the future, especially when I'm at, conventions or book signings and people are really into it, and they'll ask those kind of things. And of course, I'm only 4 books deep into what will be how many books, who knows? I've got 3 more coming out this year. 2 of them are origin stories about the main characters, and one is the bridge story that takes you from the first series into the second series of a trilogy that will launch in 2026 as a follow-up to the Warminster saga. So like, you don't want to give away the shit too much. There's all these spoiler alerts and things like that, but ultimately, that's what it's there. And so every time there's a new book, I add another piece to the realm that people can follow through and find me and ask questions about at those times.
And see, that's perfect. That answers my next question, if it ended at the fourth book, or the Echoes of Ghostwood, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
If it ended there, if you're gonna keep going, and like you said, you're gonna have some origin stories. That's cool, because then that just takes the lore even deeper, and people get more into it. And you have a great IP like that. Like, just, yeah, keep going with it. You see a lot of books, shows, games where it's just like great one part, two part, and then they just stop because it's like, it's not what we wanted, or whatever corporate reason that they want to stop. And it's like the fans are like, hey, like, we want more, you know. So that's good, you keep up with that. And then so, like, word, that's another thing I wanted to, or always ask, is like, where does it start for writing? Like, how do you even begin?
Well, you mentioned it a little earlier, and Dungeons and Dragons, right? So for me, I've been playing the game so long, and I'm primarily a steady dungeon master, right? And as a dungeon master, and for those who haven't played the game, the dungeon master is basically the storyteller. He or she is the person that will tell you the adventure and the campaign that your characters are going to embark on. And then you, as you're role playing, tell them what your characters are doing back based on the monsters and the obstacles that you put in their way, things that they need to solve. So for me, I've always been a storyteller as part of it. I've always, DM'd my own adventures. And so in many cases, it's a memorialization of the best, right? As a dungeon master and or a player of the game, you'll know when you've got a really good thing and everybody's on the hook and everybody's into it. And those are the stories that you take and then you morph into what is now a written account of some of those things. So I have old Dungeons and Dragons characters, old Dungeons and Dragons villains. I've got things that are brand new that we've never played that have been rattling around in my head for years as part of that. But there's Easter eggs in there that I leave for my friends, right? They'll notice their character name and they're like, well, that's my character name, but that's not really my character. Or oh, I recognize that scene, or I remember that battle because we fought it, or that was part of our adventure. And all those things, I think, allowed me to kind of weave them together into not just a novel, but then a series of novels. But I got to be honest, most of this stuff is new. Like when you start thinking about when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, um, as a dungeon master, you have to be on your feet, right? Because you are driving a story, and they could take a left turn or a right turn right quick. It's all up to what the players do, and you've got to be able to roll with the punches.
Right.
When you're writing a book, it's very linear because you're in control of everything. So you know what every character is going to do. You know when they're going to do it. You're going to know the mistakes they're going to make. You're going to know what that means in terms of consequence, and you make that the best story that you can. But a lot of it is really kind of born from that. It's having a creative mind and being around other creatives and using those juices and then flow to, create a story and then put words around it.
Okay, yeah. See, that's perfect. Yeah, because it's like yeah, because you have such a vast lore, like we're talking about. It's like where did all those ideas and brainstorming kind of start? And that there it goes, and that's kind of cool. And for Dungeons and Dragons, see, like that's something I've always heard about and always seen growing up. Always, it's like one of those things like you're always in, like want to get into, but you just feel like it's been, there's people that have been playing it for years. It's been going on for so long, like is it even like easy to get into right now for someone that's like kind of interested in it and has never played it or never like I'd be a total noob at it, like so I'd get obliterated any way I go. But like how does somebody new get into Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, you have to have the right kind of group too. So there's a lot of groups these days that play online, and you can hook up with the right people. And those that are experienced players often will let those noobs come in and learn on the fly, right? You don't want to put them in those situations. And it would be the same thing. I know you're a Warhammer 40K guy. Like if I were to step into that realm or Magic the Gathering, for example, you're going to want to teach me. You're going to show me the right and wrong, and you're going to, and you learn just like you're learning chess. It's not much different. This is different in the sense that your character become attached to you. The game doesn't end when you walk away from the board or the table, right? You talk about it over the weekend. You talk about it at holidays. You talk about things that happen to you. And those games have a tendency to last years. A campaign, you can have one shot where you're just here to play one night and you're done, and whatever happens at the end of the night happens. But most of the time, when you create a party, you're starting at level one. And just like a video game, might take months or weeks to get to level 20 or that whatever level you want to finish it. And so for those like you that are outside the game, it's easy to learn. It's a lot of fun. If you played a video game, you get the leveling up. You get the idea as you start. You might not have the right same amount of power, but then you're building a story around that, which makes it really cool. So your character has a background, they have a history, they have goals, and then you tell the DM, the dungeon master, what you want to accomplish, and then he or she takes that and makes it part of the story. And so sometimes you might not be the main character, but eventually, as the story goes on, there's going to be nuggets or bits and pieces you pick up that will lynch those things together and make for a broad story. And I think that finding dungeon masters to do that, especially for new players, is the way to go.
Yeah.
And someone that's willing to kind of take the time to get you to learn. But you play two sessions and you're good. You might not know which dice to roll just yet, and you may not know what all the spells do, but ultimately you get the flow of it, and it's a lot of fun. So I'd recommend trying it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna look more into that because yeah, I just needed somebody that like yeah that I talked to that's into it to be able to tell me, you'll be good. It's a good community, whatnot. Um, and that's really cool. That was actually going to be one of my questions that you weave real life experiences and influences into your stories. And is it like like everyone like this fantasy and like your world seems like a really great genre, but do you like what well Dungeons and Dragons of course and your experiences with that would make you want to go in that way with that genre, but do you have any experiences or plans with going into other different genres, or is that something authors do? How does that work?
Yeah, it's hard to do, but also, those of us that want to do it are going to do it regardless. And when I say it's hard to do, it's hard for two reasons. One is, if you were a Stephen King fan, you wouldn't want to wander into a romance section and look for a Stephen King novel. That's not what he writes, right? So you expect Stephen King to write, horror novels.
Right.
And so when you're jumping novels or jumping genre, sometimes you lose your following. Like your following might not migrate over to historical fiction.
Right. Right.
And even though you get a great historical fiction novel, they may not come to you. Secondly, you develop a subject matter expertise. The folks that are in that genre with you. The subgenres with you. You develop friendships and things alongside. Like when I go to Comic Con or GalaxyCon and I'm signing stuff, while I'm there, I get to know everybody, but I don't know the people that might be at the Vampire Con or the Undeadathon somewhere else, right? And it's just a little bit different. When you go there, even though you're an established author back here, you're a newbie there,
Uh,
and so there's some of that to it. Now, that said, I know a lot of folks in my genre that translate over. Like I just did an interview earlier this evening with a guy who writes fantasy and sci-fi, and
oh,
they're adjacent to one another, right? That kind of makes sense. And I think some horror makes sense. So any kind of speculative fiction, you could take a step to the right, a step to the left, and still be okay. You might lose some of your following, and you might have to gain it somewhere else from
Right.
a simply business perspective.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're a good writer, you can adapt to that. And I, of course, to answer your other question, I've got a great idea for a vampire novel, but I'm afraid to write it because I'm in the midst of this rolling,
Right.
this cascading series that's going to, take me into 2026 and 27. And so I'll get there one day, but it's not in the crosshairs right now.
Right, right, yeah, yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, if you got something, you got a good saga here, yeah, to keep going with it. That's always one thing when game developers or even shows, they're like, oh, makers of shows are like, we're just gonna stop this that everyone loves right now. We're just gonna focus on this other project that we want to do. It's kind of, eh. But do you, and then there's something I saw too about your book series possibly getting like a VR game or even like a like a manga type of graphic novel. How's that going?
Yeah, yes. So right now, we're in the process of doing the first. I've got about 30 cells done for book one of eight that would be a translation of the series into a graphic novel. And that's been a lot of fun being part of the storyboarding process and working with the artists and seeing what takes me 3 pages to write, them dropping into 4 or 8 cells on a page, or two back-to-back pages, and with lettering this big, being able to, or the camera angle looking up or looking down, or their eyes widened, and they are scaring you, or they're exciting you in a way that I take pages to do in prose. They're doing it through illustration, and I think that's just super cool to see that it come to life in a different medium. And you can't get everything in there. As an author, the one thing that is um, fun is seeing someone else's interpretation of it. And I've gotten a lot of fan art where people come up to you at conventions or book signings, and they're like, I drew this character for character A. What do you think? And you're like, wow, that's like an 80% representation. It's almost like a police sketch artist. It's really super cool. But then, you see this stuff come to life in the form of a graphic novel, and you're humbled by it. And I think that's a lot of fun. And the VR game is on the shelf for now. The group that's doing that is out there raising money for it. So once that happens, again, we'll launch that, but that's probably 2 years away.
Okay.
But it would be an augmented reality, virtual reality game. So the first of the two that would come out would be the AR version. The
Okay.
second would be the VR the following year. But that's a couple of years away from production. So that's on the shelf. But the graphic novel, I'm hoping that launches in 2026, right next to, and right in conjunction with the new series of 3 books.
Right. See, and that's awesome too with the graphic novel is it's kind of like we were talking about like another type of audience. But do you get like a lot of like you were talking about, it's not going to be everything that you have written into the graphic novel, but do you get any kind of like, or give any kind of feedback or pushback, things that you want? They're like, oh, we're not going to put this part in there, but you're like, no, like this is significant. I want this part in there. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so I have some level of artistic, license here, but I've also learned a hard lesson, which is they know their medium better than I do. And there might be things I want to have in there or things that I think are important, but at the end of the day, they know the graphic novel and comic book industry better than I do. And if there are certain scenes that need to be lost for the sake of, instead of my 540 page, 150,000 word novel,
Mhm.
they have 26 pages, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just hard to do. So things are going to go away, and even though you want them to stay and you can fight the good fight, in the end, what I've learned in the short time of doing this is defer to the experts, let them drive the train. They know, and they've read the books. They know what's in the story. They know what they need to take out of it. But I have had some, creative license in terms of what the characters look like to make sure they match with what. And I like what they've done is they've kind of taken this anime that reminds me of like, Harmony Gold's Robotech from the 1980s
Oh, wow.
and smashed it together with like Castlevania,
Oh,
and I think that gives it a real sort of like dark spin to it. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
that is cool. Yeah, when you put it like that, that is cool. I've always loved Castlevania. Um, if you and then another thing, if it were that, because your actually all the books have a lot of great reviews. I want to check out the audiobooks. I'm definitely interested in that. It's I'm not I am a, I don't want to say I'm not a reader because I do have books that I read, but it just, yeah, with time, you know how it goes with time and everything else. It's like you got to really find a good spot and a good time to read. So I'm definitely, I walk around and listen to podcasts and audiobooks all day. So I'll definitely check it out on audiobook. If you could ever, or if it ever was made into a movie, like who would you want to, like, who do you envision as characters playing your characters in a movie?
Oh boy, what a great question. Uh, so I think that so I'll answer this in one of two ways. My wife and her friends have already decided that every hot guy in Hollywood has to play one of the characters, right? So
Right.
they've already done this for me. So that's a question for them because they've all played this out in their heads. However, the reality is a lot of those hot guys don't fit the characters that I've written, right? So Damus, the main character, is this skinny, uncoordinated, modeled, all kind of chubby, like in the wrong places and skinny in the others. He
Right.
just doesn't, he's not athletic, he has this power. It's all in his mind, right? So it's a little different. I would think that, so one of the villains is a baron named Dragich, and I see him as Clancy Brown, who's the guy that played Kurgan in the original Highlander back in the 80s, right? Like this deep voice, tall, like 7 foot tall dude with a two-handed sword, and that voice and that face. And I think Clancy Brown would make a great villain character. And I think Charles Dance, the guy that played Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones, would make an excellent Great Taurus the Mad, the real villain in
Wow.
the whole thing. I think that he would be perfect with that voice and his even this skeletal musculature sort of face that he has. I think would fit that CGI really, really, really well if someone were to do it. But I see for Princess Adeline maybe Anya Joy Taylor, is that her name? She played in Queen's Gambit and
Oh, yes.
played it Furiosa. I think she, because she has very angular features and poignant eyes and really a unique look to her, which I think would stand out. I would think those three might be the ones that that kind of jump out. But I would be, look, I'd be remiss. I mean, I've heard a lot of good comparisons for other people too, but those are the three that I think jump out at me. But who knows? I hope we get there one day. I want to come back to this conversation, put a placeholder in it, and we'll come
Right?
back to it in a couple of years when Netflix comes calling. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. We'll put that on there. Yeah. Don't go big time on us if be like, oh, I can't do the interview. I'm busy. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but let's see here. I want to make sure because I was really interested and I had a lot of questions written down here. Oh yeah. Well, I don't want to ask you if favoritism between your characters in your book, but like if you could spend like a day like with one of your characters, in this fantasy universe, what would you do, or who would it be with?
Well, so I'll answer that in two ways, and one of them is a cheat code, right? So cheat code number one is Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer, and Sir Ritter is a former D&D player of mine. So
Ah,
he was a player character.
nice.
So that was my character, so I've already kind of played him,
Mm.
and he's kind of this like Aragorn meets Dritz Duorden kind of character where he's a mixed blood and he's a low-born border knight, but very noble and kind, and he his gallantry is what people eventually come to know him for, even though you don't think he has it in him, right? Like that kind of stuff. And I think that really is cool. And I would want to ask him, did I play him well, right? Like
Oh, wow.
as a D&D as a D&D player character, did I play him well? But the truth of the matter is my favorite character is one that one of my readers called my Boba Fett. Is a character named Incanus Druwaith, who is the assassin,
Uh,
and he is this villainous, I mean, just vile creature with no heart, like Grinch heart, like 1/10 the size kind of thing. And then you find out a little bit more about him and you find out how he got there,
uh,
right? And this guy was not always that way. And so the backstory that I'm writing right now is like how he became this villain, because no villain was born villainous, right?
right,
Something
right.
happens to
Yeah.
them and they make and he gets a chance in the books. He gets a path for redemption, and does he take it or does he not take it? And I think that's a really interesting thing. And if I was sitting down over a lunch with him, I would ask him how he got there and what he would, because that guy was never a player character at all. And it just popped into my mind about making this guy up to make sort of be Ritter's arch enemy. And so the two, are always fighting against each other through the first series,
Right.
as kind of like Holmes versus Moriarty, except more physical.
So do we see like something from like a villain to kind of like a anti-hero twist, or is it something like that?
No, I think he's a villain.
Oh, for
You
sure.
just
He's a
find,
straight up villain.
yeah, he's a Boba Fett, right? He
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
he's but you find out why he became who he was.
Oh,
And in book three in particular, those that read it, the Trillius Gambit, um, there's a scene where you could feel for him. You know that there's something behind the mask. It just never surfaces. And it
uh,
keeps tugging to the surface, but it never breaks. And then you cast yourself into his moccasins and walk a mile. And truth be told, many of us might have gone down the same path.
right.
So I think there's a humanistic element to that needs to be considered. And that's why I like his character so much.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, that's like we the topic of the day, the vast lore, and that's something that's really cool. And I like how you like talking to your characters and saying like, did I play you well, or because I think that's everyone thinks that. Anyone that's into like a RPG type, like I mentioned before, I'm a big gamer, and you get so into these games, and you just like, yeah, like freaking this character that I spent 300 hours on, I would love to just sit and meet him and talk to him. Like, why not? You know? Um,
Yep.
and then do you want to, everyone can get your books on Amazon, and do you want to plug your website and your social media so everyone can find these?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for letting me do that. I mean, jvhilliard.com is going to take you right to the website. My books are published by Dragon Moon Press. You can find them there, or you can find them at your local bookstore. You can also order them online if you're an Amazon shopper. I have them in ebook form and also audiobook form. So if you prefer those formats, you can download them there. The fourth audiobook is due out in March, so we've got a little bit of time for that, and that'll follow up for that. And then follow me on socials, right? So, at JV Hilliard Books on TikTok, X, Instagram, and YouTube, and then just JV Hilliard on Facebook and Discord. You can find me there.
Okay, nice, nice. Yeah, we'll put all the links in the description as well and tag you and all that good stuff. But yeah, man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation.
Entirely my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
All right, awesome, man. You have a great rest of your night.